Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blooded is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. Don't forget to send gear to represent your team. The address is P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Yes, we are still doing that. Just wanted to put that reminder in there because I haven't reminded anybody here recently. Trigger alert, trigger alert, trigger alert. This video will trigger SEC fans. So I'm just letting you know before you continue with this video, if you are a fan of a team in the SEC, you're going to be triggered. So the SEC is definitely the best conference right now. That's a fact. I'm not arguing with that at all. The thing that really gets on my nerves is the whole conference homer thing. And the whole mantra, it just means more. Golden Blooded, we're dominating national championships. It just means more in the SEC. Those two things aren't connected. What do I mean by that? Well, the thing is, the reason why the SEC is starting to be so dominant in college football in the national championship is because of the almighty dollar. Because ESPN got in bed with the SEC and has started to shovel them money, tons and tons of money, thereby boosting their facilities, boosting their recruiting. They're getting the best players because of that money. So it's not necessarily it just means more. It just means you're getting more money. Therefore, you have been dominating college football over the past 10, 15 years. You don't believe me? A lot of people are like, no, Golden Blooded, I've been chanting SEC, SEC, SEC since I was 5 years old. My first word was SEC. SEC was my first word. No. Conference Homerism did not exist before ESPN got in bed with the SEC. Those are facts. You want me to back it up? Gladly. Here we go. Let me back up what I just said. So what I did was I went back to 1980 and looked at the national championships just to see how dominant the SEC has been and when their dominance started. Keep that in mind. That is the biggest factor in this. When did the SEC's dominance actually start? And I could have gone even further and proved this point even more, but I stopped at 1980. I thought that was enough. So here you go. This might blow your simple minds, but I'm going to do this anyway. So between 1980 and 2006, here are the national championship stats for each conference. For the SEC, 5 national championships. That's not bad. That's not bad. Not dominating, but it's not bad. For the ACC, they had 4 national championships. And I'm counting teams that were in that conference that year. Some of these numbers might actually shift because some of these teams joined the Pac-12 or the Big 12 or the ACC. The SEC's number would stay the same. But the ACC's number would go up tremendously if I counted all of Miami's titles. Same with the Big Ten and Penn State. So keep that in mind. I counted it for the conference if the team was actually in the conference that particular year. So the SEC, 5 national championships between 1980 and 2006. Those 5 were Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, and LSU. For the ACC, 4 national championships. Those teams were Clemson, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and Florida State. For the Big Ten, they only had 2 national championships in this span, and that was Michigan, a split national championship with Nebraska, and Ohio State. For the Pac-12, they had 3 national championships. Washington, USC, and USC. Even though that title was vacated, they did win the national championship that year, so I'm counting it. For the Big 12, 7 national championships in that span. Oklahoma, Colorado was in the Big 12 at that time. Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas. For the Big East, they had 2 national championships, Miami Hurricanes and Miami Hurricanes. And finally, the Independents. They had 6 national championships. Penn State, Miami Hurricanes, BYU, Penn State, Miami Hurricanes, Notre Dame, and Miami Hurricanes. 6 national championships for Independent. Fast forward to the present. More recent, past 15 years or so. The SEC has 13 out of 17 national championships. The ACC has 3 national championships, and the Big Ten just has 1. So for the SEC, they're 13 national champions. Florida, LSU, Florida, Alabama, Auburn, Alabama, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, and Georgia. For the ACC, Florida State, Clemson, and finally for the Big Ten, Ohio State. So I can buy into the argument that the Big Ten has been overrated. I mean, not just the past 17 years, but going back to 1980, a total of just 3 national championships. That's not very good at all. I mean, the ACC, not counting the Miami Hurricanes whenever they were independent, they have 7 in that same span. Think about that, Big Ten fans. That's not good at all. Now, for the SEC, they have been dominant since 2006. When did ESPN start promoting the SEC and start shoveling them money and giving them big TV deals? Yeah, it was around that time. I'm telling you, the reason the SEC has been so dominant is because they made that decision to get in bed with ESPN, get all that money, which was a good decision. I'm not saying it's a bad decision. Not by any means. That was a great decision. But it is the reason why the SEC has been so dominant over the past 17 football seasons. The SEC has been able to get more money than any other conference in the nation. And so the facilities of all these teams in the SEC have been able to get upgraded, expanded to get the best recruits because they have the best facilities. And it's because ESPN has fit the bill. I mean, I did it. I went all the way back to 1980, and the proof is in the pudding. The conference that had the most national championships between 1980 and 2006 was actually the Big 12. And the Big 12 just got crapped on because Georgia just obliterated TCU. And yes, the Big 12 has been picked apart. They lost Colorado. They lost Nebraska. That was a big blow right there. They lost Missouri. They lost Texas A&M. And then more recently, 2 massive blows. They lost Texas and they lost Oklahoma. And what's the reason for most of that? The SEC. The only teams that they lost that didn't go to the SEC was Colorado to the Pac-12 and Nebraska to the Big Ten. The SEC is the reason why the Big 12 has been having to reload, and it's because they got in bed with ESPN, so they're showing those Big 12 teams more money. Come over to the SEC, you're going to make more money. And that's exactly what's happened. And so what's going to happen is this is going to get perpetuated, and they're going to have even more success. Why don't the SEC just split off right now and create their own playoffs and national championship? I'll tell you why. It would fail. There is a precedent for that. The best soccer leagues over there in Europe decided, hey, we're going to split off and create our own league, and we're going to make the most money. What happened? It failed miserably. People like the Cinderella story. People like parody. So if that happened, the SEC would fail miserably. So even though the SEC has been dominant since 2006 because of ESPN, make no mistake about it, it is because of ESPN. I just proved it to you. There is no argument against it. That is a fact. But the SEC needs the rest of college football, and the rest of college football needs the SEC because they need parity. And you can say, you know, we won 13 out of the last 17 national championships. We're sick of killing everybody. Won't somebody step up and give us a challenge? Well, that means you're spitting facts in a vacuum. If you just look at national championships, then yes, what you're saying is true. But if you look at playoff games and actual national championships, people have given the SEC a fight. Now, the national championship wasn't a fight for Georgia this year. The first playoff game was a challenge. Ohio State was a field goal away from knocking Georgia out of the national championship, and we would not be talking about a back-to-back national championship for Georgia. One play, one kick. So no, the gap isn't as big as you think, but because they've had so much success, they're going to keep getting that money, and they're going to keep having that success. And this is not a good thing for college football. Not at all. The SEC dominating college football is actually a terrible thing for college football. Great for the SEC. You're going to make more and more money. But this is going to get straight up boring if it isn't already. Now, the Big Ten is set to make a massive contract. Maybe they can close the gap. Since they're getting all that money, maybe they can upgrade all their facilities, get more recruits, and make it mean more for the Big Ten and close that gap. That might be the only hope. Because the Pac-12 is not going to make enough money. The Big 12 is not going to make enough money. And we sure as heck know that the ACC isn't going to make that money. So really the only conference that's going to be making that money to possibly close that gap is the Big Ten. So SEC fans, you can say it's always meant more. I've been saying that since I was 5. No, you haven't. Just stop. I'm 40 years old, believe it or not. I remember college football. I have been obsessed with college football since 1988. It has not been around all that long. About the early to mid 2000s, that's when the whole SEC thing came out. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand the conference homerism. So the team that you wanted to beat during the regular season, now you're pulling for that team just because they're a member of your conference. That makes absolutely no sense. And it seems like people forgot about last year's bowl season. The SEC had a much better bowl season this year. And then, of course, the shellacking in the national championship. But last year, really, the only thing they had going for them in bowl season was the playoffs. They had a terrible, terrible bowl season. So if the competition has such a large gap between the SEC and everybody else, why did they have a terrible bowl season last year? All you're doing is you're looking at the list of the national championships for the past 17 years, and because 13 of those names belong to the SEC, man, there's a huge talent gap and there's no hope for any other conference. No, these other conferences have been competitive, but the revenue gap is the real deal. Massive revenue gap. The Big Ten is about to close that gap, though. So y'all let me know in the comment section. Number 1, did you realize that the SEC was not so dominant before 2006? And the next thing is, do you think the Big Ten can close the national championship gap because they're about to make a truckload of money? And do you think that the SEC should just split off and create their own playoffs and national championship? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.